You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Folks, welcome to Get Woke, Vote. I'm Roland Martin, host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're having, of course, great conversations, trying to get you focused on not only voting, but also the importance of public policy. There are very few people today who are as unfiltered as I am, and I think my next guest certainly can qualify for that. She is the thorn in the side of Agent Orange, and of course she also has attracted this huge following. They now call her Auntie Maxine. We know, of course, it's Congresswoman Maxine Waters from Los Angeles. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Delighted to be here with you, and I'm so happy to hear about this program you're doing.
One of the things that it still is very interesting, because I remember when millennials sort of became of age, and all these companies were saying, "Oh my goodness, we got to go out and we got to hire somebody who's 25, who's 26, and oh, if you're over 35, you can't relate to a millennial."
That's right.
Yet since the 2016 election, you got these folks who are 15 and 17 and 19 and 20, retweeting you, walking around, reclaiming their My Time t-shirts. And who would knew an 80-plus-year-old black woman would have these millennials all hyped and giving them a run for their money?
Well, you know, I am just so honored that young people have decided that they like what I say and the way that I handle my politics. I just try and talk straight, talk plain, tell it like it is, and confront those who think they're so powerful that they can intimidate. And so I don't take it, and I don't try in any way to send any signals that maybe you should be very nice and calm and not upset anybody. I just do what my heart tells me to do, and the kids like it. And for some reason, they have not seen this in their lifetimes.
I think what it is authenticity. John Murray, entertainment journalist, he hit me one day. He said, "Man, I'm on this airplane, and there's his brother. He's a 25-year-old wrestler, and man, he was just going on and on about you, and he didn't know we were friends." He said, "Roland," he said, "this dude is 25." And I was kind of like, all right. And then I would go other places and go to college campuses, whatever. I think what it is authenticity. Somebody who is going to say it just like it is, unapologetic, unfiltered, and they're saying, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, the niceties and let me go ahead and spin it. No, I want somebody who's going to give it to me straight and say the way it needs to be said.
Well, I think so, and you know this better than anybody else. You and I and those who will speak our mind, we're going to be criticized, we're going to be attacked, but that really doesn't bother us. I mean, we've been through this, and we're going to continue to go through it. And I'm just pleased that we've been able to send a signal to young people that we care about these issues so very much. We're not going to play politics with them. We're not going to try and hide whomever we are behind the kind of language that they don't understand. And so because of that, this authenticity that you're talking about is helping us to realize a whole new era and a whole new time of possibilities for young people to participate.
I think it's also important to let them know that you got to fight. That you can, like, for instance, I spent 6 years at CNN, and for me, I never understood in a debate, well, you would speak and they would say, okay, how do you respond? And I'm going, they just lied. And you're sitting there going, okay, are you going to call that lie out or not? And then, so they allow the conversation to go forth. It's like, okay, we've run out of time. I'm like, no, don't come with the fact check tomorrow. Correct the lie. And that's why when they would come on my show, they would say something. I'm like, hold up, I'm going to let you finish. But you just lied. Because my philosophy is that if I don't stop you right then, if somebody is watching, they're sitting at home going, well, Roland didn't say anything, so that must be true. I think people have allowed other folks to lie, to make stuff up, and never called them out on it. And then it gained a foothold, and folks began to believe the lie, and that thing began to take off.
Well, they either believe the lie or they think all of us are just dishonest. And not only will we sit and allow someone to lie and not challenge them, then you're right, something's wrong with us. And so I think that the millennials are now beginning to understand that there's a difference, even in the political parties. There's a difference with elected officials and how they handle public policy. And there's a difference between those who just want a title and want some perks and a little upward mobility, and those who are saying, hey, this is who I am, like me or not, I'm going to tell it like it is, and if that means I don't win my election, then so be it.
I was home in Texas a few weeks ago, and I was sitting with my parents, and I said, did y'all see the video of Congresswoman, when she said, "I will not yield," my dad was like, "No." So I pull it up, and I play it. Oh my God, my dad's like, "Play that back again." He was like, because it was, I mean, here you had this member of Congress defending discrimination.
Yes.
And I watched it, and then the chair is trying to tell you, you must address the chair. You like, you ain't say nothing to him.
That's right.
And again, the whole game of, well, we're collegial colleagues, and so
the
therefore,
gentlewoman. I'm no gentlewoman.
If I ask you to please yield, you go ahead and do it. You like, hell no, I ain't yielding. but again, that's what I mean by fighting. Folks want to know, are you there fighting for me?
Absolutely.
Or are you just there to go along and get along?
Well, there are those who would say even Democrats have not learned how to fight, and that we're being taken advantage of because we're being nice, or we don't want to be called uncivil. And so we have somebody like this president and others who are doing all kind of things. The President of the United States calling people out of his rallies, talking about, send them out on a stretcher, I'll get you out of jail, and on and on and on. And we still are trying to pretend like that's not what's happening. And now they're trying to turn it on us and call us violent, and call the women who protested recently about the nomination of Kavanaugh violent. And so we've got to learn how to fight. And I think a lot of people now are saying, well, Michelle said, when they go low, we go high. And Eric Holder.
I went with that when she said.
Eric Holder, I think just today.
Right, he did.
Said, no. We're not with that.
Right. He said they go high. He said when they go low.
That's right.
You hit them lower. No, because again, it's so good. I understood philosophically.
Yeah.
And that sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds great. But the reality is, when you in a street fight, I remember Reverend Willie Wilson. He spoke at my church in Dallas, and they some thugs stole the church equipment, stole their the drums, and stole the microphones and everything. And so Willie went to the Pope. He said, "Look," he said, I need my Christian thugs." He said, I don't need all y'all who just want to just pray with folks. He said, I need the folk who used to be in the streets who now love Jesus to go get back our equipment. And so several brothers volunteered, and they got the equipment back in 48 hours.
Wow.
And he was like, he said, sometimes you got to have some folks who say, no, we'll handle this. You got to have folks who are willing to go toe to toe and say, I'm not going to back down from you.
Well, I think we've got to be honest about our feelings. This business about hiding your anger and not being considered someone who will go off, etc., is what limits us from being able to be authentic. You're walking around watching people in pain, you're watching homelessness, you're watching women being assaulted, and you're supposed to be smiling all the time and pretending like it's not bothering you and that you don't have the ability to be angry. I told someone the other day who is trying to say that we're violent when we protest. Protest is about making you feel uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to come to you and say, may I protest you?
Right.
No, absolutely not. If your heart tells you that this is what you need to do because you see some injustice, that you see people who are creating, a terrible time and pain for others, and you want to protest to try and make change, to try and make it right, then speak what your heart is telling you to do.
What cracks me up, though, is these are the same people who love to talk about the founding fathers. And I'm going, you do know dissent with how this whole thing started. I'm going, you're running around acting as if protests, that's why I love when I'm sitting here, when I'm blasting that dude with the NRA Grant, whatever his name is, and Dana Lash. I said, I do want y'all to know that before y'all beloved Second Amendment, it was first for a reason.
Yeah.
And they love to skip as if that didn't exist.
Yes.
And I'm going, it was there by design. Now, I didn't like the founding fathers. They damn sure not my founding fathers. But I'm gonna read the Constitution y'all wouldn't let us actually abide by, and it clearly says that freedom of assembly,
That's right.
freedom
right.
of speech,
First Amendment rights.
right?
Yes.
They love to skip over that one
Yeah.
to go right to the guns.
That's right. That's right. Well, let me just say this. The Constitution of the United States guarantees us First Amendment rights. And because of us, we have strengthened the democracy. We're the real patriots. We have stood with our country. We've fought for our country. We've had people who have gone to war, who returned home with no housing, no jobs, but
Lynched in uniforms.
absolutely. But they stayed and they fought and they protested. And the civil rights movement taught us how to protest, how to stick with it, and whether it's the civil rights movement or organized labor who protest today, often they are rallying, they're marching, and they're fighting, and they're up against some of the biggest corporations in America about, decent pay and decent benefits. It is because of protests that we've been able to make America better. We're the patriots who say we believe in this country and we believe that it can be about justice and equality for everybody. And we can't back up from that.
Right.
We can't allow anybody to intimidate us and call us violent and talk about somehow we are approaching the establishment in a terrible way. We can't allow them to take away our right to protest. And so I think the young people see that. They understand that many of them, have gone through life, graduated from college. They've been taught by their parents, now you be nice. And if you get that job, I want you to dress right. I want you to speak the King's English the way it's supposed to be spoken. I don't want you to cause any trouble. And maybe you'll get a promotion. And so they have done this. And many of them have graduated. They can't find the jobs comparable to their education. They're being discriminated against on the job. They're confronted with racism on the job. And they're still trying to abide by what their mothers and their fathers and their grandmothers told them to do. And they have gotten angry. And they've gotten tired of that. And they don't believe in any of us because what they have been taught has not worked for them. It's not fair. And so when they see change and they see those who are willing to speak truth to power and to confront, racism, etc., I think it is allowing them to become themselves and to think the thoughts and talk about them in a very vocal way, in ways that they had not done before. And so I'm pleased about that. And I'm looking forward to the millennials really making a difference, not only in this midterm election, but certainly in 2020.
So it's interesting as you were talking, when you were talking about this whole idea of, oh, no, you really shouldn't fight.
Yes.
I mean, that's what America told the ANC in apartheid. Oh, you guys are violent. And it's like, are you not paying attention to Botha and the racists running the government? And then they say, well, they kept telling Mandela, you need to renounce violence. He's like, hold up.
No.
Because the reality is, he said, we're fighting a system. And I just think it's very interesting, again, as somebody who understands history, to listen to folk act as if this nation hasn't used violence to become the nation that it is.
Well, I mean, it does not take an educated historian to understand the history of the nation and what has happened, the racism, the hangings, the beatings, all of that. I mean, that's a part of this history.
Yeah, that's
and
violence.
No one can deny that. And while we have been taught, by Martin Luther King and others, that you must not be violent and don't approach things with violence. We don't start out approaching things with violence. We start out about talking to people. We pray a lot. We do a lot of that, but we don't start out punching people. We don't start out shooting people. We've never hanged anybody. We don't take guns and shoot down, crowds of people. We don't do any of that. But to say that our protest somehow is violent, and the way that this president is now defining our protest as us being mobs that are somehow trying to destroy the government is something we absolutely have to resist. And we shall not and must not allow that to describe us in any shape, form, or fashion.
You make a great point about what young folks are taught by parents.
Yes.
Because as you were
Yes.
talking, what I immediately thought back to was Carolyn Hunter and Ken Williams. And, all these folks, they talk about apartheid, they talk about the sanctions, things along those lines. But it was Ken Williams, worked at Polaroid, and when he walked into the building, he realized that the pass books that they were using in South Africa to check the papers of black people, Polaroid was supplying those. And so he began to protest. And so Carolyn Hunter, this sister had she graduated, degree in chemistry. She was 25, 26, had her job. And so she began to join with her. And just what you said, her mama said, baby, hold up. Now, baby, you a chemistry major. You just got your degree. Yeah. You got you a good job. Mm-hmm. You do not need to go in there making all this noise. And she said, no, mama, this is not right. And it was the Polaroid revolutionary workers who told Ron Dellums and Conyers about those past books. Mm-hmm. When I interviewed Dellums when Mandela died, he said, I got called to a meeting. They told us, and that's how we learned about what Polaroid was doing. And that's how we started to get involved in the anti-apartheid movement when it came to sanctions. Now, when people praise it today, they act as if these major corporations were the ones who start withdrawing.
Oh, no,
but it was Ken Williams and a 26-year-old sister, Carolyn Hunter, they later got married, who started this thing at Polaroid. And her mama said, you shouldn't do it. She said, no. And the reason it blew me away, I'm in New York at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm watching this documentary, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, hold up, what's that woman's name? And I texted this sister and I went, is this your mama? When I stayed at Martha's Vineyard, I stayed at her house.
Oh, really?
I had no idea it was her.
Wow.
But her mama said exactly what you said. Do not get involved in this, baby, because you got you a good job.
Well, yeah, no, we know that parents who sacrificed and worked hard to get the children through school did not want them to, be confronted with the kind of injustice that they had experienced. They wanted them to be safe. They wanted them to be secure. They wanted them to have a decent quality of life. And they thought the way to do that is to counsel them how to be nice, how not to make other people angry, how not to make other people dismiss you or undermine you. And so that counseling, I think, has caused too many brilliant and talented young people not to become the people that they can become.
Yeah, there's no fight there.
That's right.
Then when they come up against something, it's, oh my God, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Because you never had to swing for something.
That's right. That's absolutely true. So here we are.
I want you to tell this story because I know it.
Yes.
But the people watching don't know it, because this is also talks about how you got to fight even against your own.
Yes.
So in 2009, I believe, so I get a phone call at 10 o'clock at night on a Thursday night, and it's the White House, senior official in the Obama administration. Hey, Roland, we just had this really contentious meeting with Congressional Black Caucus over this House Financial Services Reform Bill. And look, we just can't go along with all the CBC is talking about. Are you going to be discussing this on the radio tomorrow? Now I don't know what the hell he's talking about. But I go, I ain't going to talk about it tomorrow. I said, we're going to discuss it on the show on Monday. So I'm just sitting there listening. And so then he begins to talk about it. And he was talking about the effort you, Congressman Gregory Meeks, laid when it came to that $4 billion for those officers of minority lending. And then when y'all withheld y'all votes in the committee, because you said, no, that money's coming to us. And then, of course, when it passed, they tried to pull it out of the Senate. It kills me when people say, oh, I don't see what the CBC is doing. And I actually had black people who said, I would have rather the CBC not fought Obama on that and we not get the $4 billion. I said, yo, that's $4 billion we talking about. And so even when you talk about fighting your own party members or an African-American president, there were folks who were saying, oh, y'all, you shouldn't do that. You were in the middle of that, and the White House was not happy with you and the CBC members on that committee because y'all like, no, we need this money.
Well, I and others on the Financial Services Committee on that particular issue had been meeting at my home in Washington, D.C. on a constant basis leading up to the vote. And basically, what we had was an attempt by those who were in power to say that we could not demand that money because that would not happen. It could not happen. That the Republicans were not going to go along with it, and it would make us look bad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're absolutely right. We left the meeting and we went into a back room. And in the back room, that's when a number of individuals were sent from the White House to come and help us to understand why we had to go along and go back into the committee and just understand that we didn't have the votes. Well, it got pretty nasty back there. And you're absolutely right. It is not always just about party. It's not always just about the tradition and way things are normally done. It's about whether or not you feel deeply about whether or not it's right or wrong. And I want to tell you, as you know, we're struggling all the time to come up with the resources that are needed to deal with many of the intractable problems that we are confronted with in our communities. And so sometimes we have to fight. We have to get a little nasty. We have to demand, no matter who it is we're dealing with. And I think what you're referring to is one of those occasions.
And they were not happy. I mean, they were really upset. But what got me was black folks. I was moderating a panel at CBC AOC, and a brother literally stood up. It was Congresswoman Terry Sewell's panel, and he said, I would rather not get the billions of dollars than to embarrass black president. I said, you lost your damn mind. and I believe this I said, you lost your damn mind. Because here's what I believe what happened. I believe we were so enamored with the first black president, we forgot he was the 44th. We were focused on the first and not the 44th. And I kept saying, look, if you're going to ask the previous 43 to make demands, you better make demands of the 44th, like you're going to make demands of the 45th and the 46th. And that was just, it was stunning to me to watch folks literally mad at you and Meeks and others saying, how dare you do that? I'm going, that's their job.
Let me just say this, because you know that many folks in our community, and particularly, older folk, they were so thrilled and happy to see a black man become the president of the United States of America. They thought they would never, ever see that in their lifetime. And for them, everything that they had fought for, everything they had worked for, now could be realized in this individual. And they were so proud of him. I got that.
Mm-hmm.
I got
Me too.
that. And I know that people were willing to put aside any thoughts that they may have that they thought perhaps he was not absolutely correct and maybe in what he was doing. Maybe they thought maybe he wasn't doing enough, but they were willing to put that aside if they had those kind of thoughts. And so that's okay. I get that. And I understand that kind of pride
right.
In the fact that this black man was the president of the United States. But for those of us who were fortunate enough to be socialized and reared in such a way that we were allowed to be ourselves, and we, felt pretty confident that we had a right to be treated fairly, to get the kind of resources that many others were getting from government, particularly as related to the big energy program that was going on at that time. We knew that we had to do what we had to do. And so the Financial Services Committee, as you know, at that time, for the first time, had the largest number of African Americans that ever served on that committee.
I think it was like 10.
And so we used our power. And so Barney Frank was the chair at that time. Mm-hmm. So we would not come out of the back room with the fight. So Barney Frank went and begged a Republican, please, I'll owe you one. I'll do whatever, but please, let's get this over with because they're not coming out. They're not going to come back and participate. So he was able to swing one vote And then we came out, they gave us the majority, and we were able to get the program that basically put resources into communities to rehab those houses that had been boarded up because of the 2008 recession that had been caused by Wall Street as they came out with those exotic products, getting people to sign on the dotted line for mortgages they really could not afford. And so that's but one instance of the kind of work you have to do sometime to go against even those who you share the same party with.
I want you to explain that because when folks are out here saying, look, I'm not trying to vote because I don't see with them Black Caucus people, they ain't doing nothing. They're not accomplishing anything. The reality is, as somebody who has covered City Hall, who's covered county government, who's covered in multiple cities, also what happens in Congress. There are things that you do, the things that you're able to affect that most people will never ever see, never ever hear about. Literally, it could be the removal of a sentence in a bill that could alter it in a way. It's stuff like that that happens that's hard to articulate to people when they say, well, I'm not wasting my time voting for her or voting for him because I just don't see what they've accomplished for our community.
Well, you know, it's very difficult to really educate the public on, you know, how Congress really works and how legislation is developed. You will see a piece of legislation with a couple of names on it as co-authors, but that legislation has gone through a process where there may be 50 or 60 amendments on it. And when it comes across you in your committee, and you have some ideas about how you can make that legislation better, how you can keep it from being harmful to the people you represent, you put together that amendment and you fight hard to get that amendment inside that bill. And oftentimes you do. But, you know, in financial services, my committee, for example, I know that we are not covered adequately. I know that there are a few newspapers, for example, that focus on financial services issues who may write something about it, but the average media does not get it.
Yep.
And our newspapers at home don't get it because we're talking about everything from derivatives, you know, to the Volcker rule, and that's not sexy. And people don't get that. But, you know, when you have something like the Volcker rule, what you're talking about is keeping these banks from taking the money that's deposited in them by the average worker and going out and gambling with it and trading, you know, as these big banks do. You are working oftentimes on issues that deal with, you know, Wells Fargo, for example, to stop them from taking out accounts in individuals' names that don't even know that they're creating these accounts where they're trying to make their bank look as if it's growing so that they'll get a lot more investments in it. So whether we're talking about dealing with the fraud that's perpetrated on the average person by some of the biggest banks and financial institutions in this country, or we're talking about the fiduciary rule that will stop, you know, investment advisors from taking advantage of the average person who wants to get some advice on their investments, and instead of them directing them what's in their best interest, they're only looking for what's in their best interest and how much money they're going to make if they get you to invest in a certain product. That's not written about, and it's not going to be written about, but we just have to do the work that needs to be done to protect people that need to be protected. And so you're absolutely right. The legislative process is complicated and it's very difficult. The Black Caucus does a lot of work in every committee that we serve on, whether it is, you know, my financial services committee, or whether it's Benny Thompson with Homeland Security, or whether it is, you know, Cummings sitting on the Oversight Committee. We are constantly in battle trying to, you know, formulate legislation that will not harm not only our communities, but many other communities. We are on the case, and we know that we get criticized because all people see oftentimes is what the media will let them see. You know, they might come to me, you know, and they want me to talk about slavery. And I said, no, I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about the banks.
Right.
And I'm talking about Wall Street. Well, they don't want to hear that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so you get defined based on what the media will allow you to say and do in the way that they present you. So thank God for black media. Thank God for these little newspapers that are in our communities, because we do get a chance to at least talk about some of these issues.
You recall the first election you voted in?
No, but I voted when I turned 18. Yes.
What did that feel like? But also, was that something that was ingrained in you? So like, now, when you turn 18, you know you voting. Because there are a lot of people who are growing up, and that's just not a part of their family life. That's just not what they do.
Well, you know, it was interesting the way local politics worked back in the day when I was coming up. You had a local committee person who was responsible for a certain area. And I came from a huge family. I have 12 brothers and sisters, and we had very little. But your local committee person was the one that you went to say, look, we need some coal in this house, you know, because we had burning, you know, coals that burned actual lumps of coal. And so they would help you to get coal delivered to your house. If it was in summertime, it might be ice, or it may be other things that they helped, you know, poor people with, the average family with. And so that's how I saw politics. Politics is about, you know, people who are in the political arena helping folks. Now, that was a very, very, you know, limited way, but it was about helping folks. And so I've always seen politics as a way by which you could help the least of these. And then, of course, I really believed in the Constitution that was taught to us. I really believed in the 3 branches of government. I thought it was exciting. When I was in school, you know, learning about how government was supposed to work. And then in our school, we had, you know, different clubs, the Human Relations Club, and this club and that club. And so I basically had the opportunity, you know, to be around people and family that in their own way was involved in politics and government. And so I was kind of reared on all of that. And I looked forward to voting. And I liked the idea of the debates. And, you know, people talking about, you know, what they care about, that kind of thing. My mother talked politics a lot. She was very limited. She was uneducated. And I can recall when I disagreed with her, when she said she was going to vote for Eisenhower because he brought our boys home. That's what they used to say. You know, they brought our boys home from the war. So she was going to, but he was a Republican. And I thought, you can't do that. But she really believed that that's why he should be voted for. So I had the opportunity to engage at a very young age, not only with my mother, but kind of others around us who would sit around and talk politics. They talked it in their own language, in their own way, but you know, you got a chance to listen, and I was interested. And I patterned myself after some of them, yeah.
So how does it make you feel when you encounter somebody who says, this is a waste of my time? This means nothing. It is not going to change anything.
Well, I have to tell you, it's very hurtful. I can recall walking precincts, and I do still walk precincts and knock on doors, you know, not only for myself, but in different campaigns that I'm working in. And I can recall knocking on a door in the city of Inglewood, which is now part of my district. And the young lady who answered the door was unkind. And she says, I don't vote. Don't bother me. I don't want to be bothered with that. And I can remember how hurt I felt thinking about what we do and, you know, how we're in a constant struggle to provide for, you know, to work in the best interests of people. Now, here's what I finally discovered. In talking with her and some others, you know, after that, they don't see the connection between you know, clean water and what you do. They don't see the connection between what you do and what we're doing now, even about climate change.
Right.
They don't see the connection between welfare even. You know, even though welfare has changed an awful lot, they don't know that somebody makes that happen. You know, as a matter of fact, I remember one lady said, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. No, that is not the way it's supposed to be. That is the way people make it because they work for it, whatever it is. But much of what goes on, when we talk about safety and security and all of that, and why cars, you know, are not killing us with the emissions that are coming from, you know, automobiles, they don't oftentimes know that's because people fought to make sure the air was cleaner and that these emissions were not coming out of, you know, the back of these cars and causing us harm. They just don't know that, and we still have not found a way to talk to the masses long enough, and in a way that we can help them to understand what we do. We have lots of television,
Right.
But it is wasted.
Lots of information, but
Nothingness, basically. But education, for the most part, does not come from the greatest media that we have, you know.
just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
When you think about the fact that 2043, we are going to be a nation that's majority people of color. I've really focused on this a lot, on television, on radio, in my speeches. That my focus is trying to prepare us to have demographic power while also having educational, economic power at the same time. Because there's nothing worse than having demographic numbers, but then you still don't have that economic power, that political power, and education power.
Well, you know, you and I think most people know and understand that education is what we've got to impress on all of our people. We've got to help people to understand that if you want a decent quality of life, if you want the kind of quality of life where you're not having to worry about your food and your nutrition and, you know, being able to pay your bills or buy a house, then you've got to become educated. The more education you have, the larger the paycheck is. And of course, we've got to be involved in entrepreneurship, taking the talent that we have to create businesses. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. And we know that we have a lot of smart young people. But one of the things I want to concentrate on in financial services is opening up access to capital,
Right.
to be able to have startups and to be able to expand small businesses. We've been cut off from the opportunity to have access to capitals because banks have just discriminated against us.
Yep.
They will not lend us the money. They will not take the chance, no matter oftentimes how smart you are, how talented you are, and sometimes you can have a business where you have contracts that are lined up, that signed on the dotted line for you to produce a good or service. And there are others who can take the contracts to the bank
Yep.
and show them they're marketable,
Yep.
and they will lend money on those contracts. But that doesn't happen for us.
Which is why
Yes.
Maynard Jackson was so powerful.
That's right.
When he said, they got contracts, give them extend lines of credit. And the bank
Yes.
said no, and he
That's
said,
right.
pull the city money out their banks.
Well, you know, you've got to learn to leverage whatever power that you have. And for people who get elected to office and they don't understand or they're not willing to work to leverage that power and influence, they really don't need to be there. As a matter of fact, they're doing a disservice to the people who send them there to represent them. Oftentimes, you've got to figure out exactly what somebody else wants and know what you want, and you have to say one for you and one for me, you know? One for you and one for me. If I don't get mine, you don't get yours.
That's
you
how
know?
it works.
That's how it works. And so we've got to be willing to do that. What's interesting about what we do is this. We have people who come to us from all over the country. I have people who call me. I never heard of them.
Right.
I don't know anything about them, but they feel confident enough to call me as a ranking member of financial services and ask me to do something or explain to me what they have somebody lobbying for
Right.
that's in their best interest. I have people that I have represented for years I've never heard from. They don't call, they don't ask for anything. And what we've got to do is have people understand that we're there to represent them, and that our offices are open to them. Call us, ask us, tell us what you're trying to do. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but if I am fortunate enough to become the chair of the Financial Services Committee, if we take back the House, I want to sit down and I want to talk with the biggest banks in America about how we're going to create some products directed at millennials. How are we going to create some products that's directed toward small business people? I think we have a lot of folks, we have some ideas about apps and about ways that they can find a niche in the new technology, but they don't know where to go with it. They don't know how to get finance for it, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I want to do, prior to retiring from office. I want to open up those opportunities because economics is extremely important. If we're to grow our communities, if we're to make sure that we have the resources to invest in stabilizing our communities with the kind of businesses and the kind of ownership, then, we've got to do the work to get it done.
You thought about retirement?
Of course not. I'm going to be here until I'm 100 years old.
So here's the last thing. So I'm asking of every person. I was at the NAACP convention and I moderated a panel. And I've long said that we aren't, the messaging is not, to me, right, trying to get somebody to understand why they should vote. So I challenged them at the convention. I said, all right, you got 30 seconds. You run into a young person, you run into somebody middle age, you run into somebody who's older, that woman you knocked on that door, I'm not voting. So all you got is 30 seconds. They may be trying to grab you while you trying to board a plane. So if you got 30 seconds to tell somebody why they must vote, what do you tell them? Go.
There are a lot of folks out here who don't want you to vote. And they're doing everything to keep you from voting because they don't want you to have power. They don't want you to have the money. They don't want you to have the resources to have a decent quality of life. And those are some of the people who are living in the best styles with the most money in this country. So if you don't want to have them continue to tell you what you can have, you better get out here and vote.
That was 22 seconds. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.